Well, we're the largest exchange in the world. We hit this amazing milestone recently of 210 million users, which is about just under half of those kind of totally using crypto. There's still a whopping like 95% of the global population that has not even engaged or touched crypto.
Sam, how are we living?
We are living, Avery. I know it is very close to VCon. How are you feeling specifically about this amazing event that you guys do? What is this, the third year?
This is the third year of VCon. The VFriends team who's putting all of this on has done an incredible job. It's at LA Live this year, so August 8th. So if you were listening to this podcast before August 8th, go and get yourself a ticket to VCon. It is going to be amazing. Really excited about it. Same as you well know, VCon pioneered the use of NFT tickets, and it continues to do cool new things. We just announced So Media is going to be there. We've got T-Pain performing. There's all different types of incredible artists and creators and innovators and a lot of brand folks. So we are super pumped about that. We are in the home stretch. In a week, I will be in LA.
I love that. Yes, we took a lot of inspiration from you guys when we did our ticket for Consensus. So I think that you guys were so early in that, which I really think was a game changer for everybody. I also would say in some respects, Avery, VCon reflects more and more about our own evolution with Gen Z. Brands,
Absolutely.
Creators, artists, innovators. I think I love the fact that you guys are not pure Web3, that you're really thinking at a broader level for an event that could be inspirational for so many people. So looking forward to getting the review of that one soon.
And the last little plug that I think is really cool about VCon this year, because you're exactly right, it continues to broaden between business, innovation, pop culture, marketing, et cetera. This year, there's actually also going to be Friends Fest, which is an outdoor component just based on how much people loved that last year. So you want to bring your dog, you want to walk around outside. Even people who are not ticket holders can experience and enjoy that, which I think will be great. So more people can understand the magic of VCon. And as you know, this is also sort of underpinning the launch of Gary's IP brand, VFriends, which continues to do really cool stuff. They've got some awesome series happening. The mascots are everywhere. We have this whole live shopping initiative on Fanatics. There's so many cool things happening there. Tam, we need to do an episode actually on live commerce soon, because this is something that I'm getting increasingly hot on.
I would love to do that. We'll get that in the book. All right. The first story I want to talk to you about, Avery, is I don't know where you ended up on the side of Drake versus Kendrick, but the thing that continues to just impress me is here we are now, it feels like months after, and it's still like the memification, the remixification, the idea that Kendrick, who clearly, like, Drake just needs to apologize at this point because it's getting a bit embarrassing, but like his fans have taken this on its own. You know, we saw the people who were making the BBL Drizzy stuff and all the songs and dances and all the stuff that came out of that. I just came across something called Not Like Us Game, which is notlikeusgame.com. Anyone should go there. In essence, what it is an 8-bit game where you just play a character who all they do is swipe down owls, which is like a symbol for Drake and his collective. And while this 8-bit version of Not Like Us plays. And it just made me think, and it was created by this guy who was one of the lead designers on Fortnite. So he has his own, sort of like social impact. And so the idea that months later, people are still taking this, like, in essence, mimetic song that has taken over, and then they make it their own. And then not only that, they make products of it. They make t-shirts of it. They make dances and TikToks and remixes of it. It just really made me think about the idea of, are there ways that brands can maybe think through this and take more opportunity with, like, really just giving the keys over to folks and saying, have at it? And is that really part of the strategy when you are working with creators?
So, Sam, there's a lot to what you just said. And also, we clearly see where you stand on the Drake versus Kendrick debate.
No comment.
I think this is just like a broader trend, though, that we're seeing of creators leaning into culturally relevant things to kind of maximize the moment. And I think it's a way for people to be like, okay, attention is here. Let me jump onto this. We just had this amazing conversation with Liz. It's the exact same thing, right? Something is trending, something is hot. You are creating something to sort of ride that wave.
So when thinking about brands, I mean, to me, it goes back to the 2006 era, 2008 era, where brands had to get comfortable that people were going to make social media about their brands.
They're not comfortable, Sam. I think that's the unfortunate reality is they're actually still not comfortable. If you saw the amount of like debate and discussion over minutia on social media as it happens with the biggest brands, you would be shocked.
I would be, and I think it's such a miss to not just allow it all to happen. I mean, it reminds me of what's going on right now with Marc Jacobs. I don't know if you paid attention to this. There's this creator, Nara Smith, who Marc Jacobs hired. Basically, she does all this amazing cooking content, and she basically created what was in essence a Marc Jacobs bag out of. She did like a cake style cooking thing, and then opens the oven. There's the Marc Jacobs red bag. Except that she then got attacked because she was like, "Oh, this was exactly another creator's idea," and then who then took the idea from a creator in Africa who was not able to monetize because they can't in Africa for most of their content. And it ended up being this thing where like Marc Jacobs and their brand starts getting attacked for like enabling creators to steal other people's content. And I'm kind of like, have you been on TikTok? Like there's 10,000 of the same dance. There's 10,000 of the same people trying recipes. There's 10,000 of, to me, like the Stanley Cup or whatever it was. Like this is how brands propagate. So it does feel to me a little bit brands that are not willing to say, sometimes we just release things into the world and let the things live. For good or bad, it still is attention. Am I just missing something there at the brand level?
Rights, Sam. I think rights are a very real thing because you might not go sue anonymous meme accounts, but you could probably sue a brand who is potentially trying to monetize or get attention off of those things. And that happens all the time too. I think participating in that culture, like we talked last week a little bit around commenting as a smart way to do that, that is okay. But like memifying something entirely, especially for big brands, does present a lot of risk. And because you don't have the rights to do that, what about if they sue you? One sort of like other broad thing that's happened, it's kind of cooled off over the last few months, but around a year ago it was big, was also brands were using sounds on TikTok and on Instagram, popular music, essentially, that they didn't have the rights to. Usually when you do an ad, you have to get the rights in order to put that on TV, et cetera, or even on YouTube, anywhere. Social media had this like little loophole for a minute there. Maybe people were thinking it's a loophole, but the record labels were like, it is not a loophole. You got to pay us for that too. So then along came the commercial library. I think what you're talking about in this context is a little bit of the reason that brands don't go there all the time in a direct way. Well, creators can, and creators can participate in that. With that said, I think the flip side of that is the original creators still don't love that. You know, they don't love someone else taking their work and repackaging it. And Adam from Instagram has actually made several comments recently around the algorithm is now going to start prioritizing the original creator, not the people who are memifying it or adjusting it and then making it viral. I don't think that they've fully cracked the code on how to do that because it's hard to, but at least that's the intent.
Yes, makes sense. All right, Avery, I want to jump to the next story. This one went around my circles yesterday and the day before in quite a big way, which was the idea that DraftKings, who, Matt Kalish, I think was our first guest on the show, if I remember correctly, that DraftKings, maybe second, I think Mags was maybe the first, but that DraftKings they were dumping their NFT project, the Rainmakers game that they had, which was in essence fantasy football with NFTs. Yep. And they basically said that they're dumping this. And what they're citing is the fact that it's been deemed a security. And as we know, NFTs, this is a very gray area. And I think a lot of fans were pretty upset at the idea of all this money I invested, all this time now does not let me continue. I think people felt a little bit duped by it. I was wondering, not about DraftKings specifically, I think this is a business choice for them.
Yep.
I was thinking about the larger meta, which is we sort of continually have seen brands exit the NFT space. And I do think a lot of it is just fear-based because they're like, this is a great example. Hey, if the government deems these securities, what does that mean to all the fans that have now participated and to the brand itself that now has to deal with a giant legal mess? And I just think it's so hard for a brand to be in the NFT side of Web3 right now that it makes me wary of who wants to even engage in that. We've had so many companies on this show that have released NFTs from Bang & Olufsen to, BMW, right? So what does it mean for them? And I guess what's your take on how brands should, or maybe more so should not, be experimenting in this side of Web3?
So for one, actually, I think a lot of people loved DraftKings' Rainmakers product because they're a betting company. I think some of that is a little bit inherent to their audience. Like they have a hyper engaged audience, super digital savvy, super open and comfortable with things like betting. Like that's how they built their entire business. And DraftKings is certainly no stranger to being on the bleeding edge of legislation. Let's put it that way. I think they've changed laws in a lot of states to enable online betting, and they know what they're doing in that capacity. I think the sort of broader The broader trend, which you mentioned, is some brands, no longer participating in NFTs. But to me, this actually links back to what we were just talking about of pop culture and like of cultural relevance. 2 years ago, that was a super relevant thing to do. That was a thing that celebrities were talking about. That was the thing that consumers were asking for. That was the thing that was going viral on social media. And today it isn't. And like, there's always, trends change, like what people are interested in changes. The social platforms of the meta are constantly evolving. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for a brand to be in and out of various forms of emerging technology, especially if they're doing so in a way that is clearly not as financial gain. So I think a lot of the brands you mentioned there, they tied something that was like a digital collectible to a format of utility that sort of leaned into this cultural movement that was happening. And I think we're going to see a lot of those things sort of continue. I was just actually looking into Red Bull Racing's past, and of course they have some big crypto sponsors, so they're not going anywhere on this, but they continue to release cool new things. And I think several brands are sort of in that space. So all hope is not lost for me.
I also wonder if there's a little bit of a wait and see approach. We are still, 3.5 months away from an election. The election may turn the tide depending on what happens in terms of favorability towards the crypto industry. I think that if there was a clear roadmap of how we should deal with digital assets, especially ones that may be more participation based versus financially based, it would be easier for these brands to play along. So I think it's something we got to keep our eye on. I think that we are also seeing in Asia, there's a lot more openness to these categories, which is we're not seeing those nearly as much, I think, specifically in the US. And I think probably for the right reasons of let's see what happens. All right. The final story I want to ask you about, there's an article in The Information this week. Meta has scrapped its celebrity AI personalities. For anyone who had not played with them, there was one.
Maybe for the best for now.
Possible, yeah. It wasn't the best product in my opinion, but I think even both Wen and I were at the launch of it at the Meta New York office about a year ago. And what was interesting about it was, they had done deals with Snoop and with Kylie Jenner, and they had done it with, I think it was like Roy Choi, the chef. Like each one was then this persona. Snoop was a dungeon master who was kind of playing this game world and talking to you about music. It never really took off. It didn't seem to have any real personality. It was very interesting in the beginning, but then sort of became less interesting as you used it, which I thought was sort of like the opposite of most other AI. I think, which at least the more you're like, oh, I can see why. Counterintuitive. And then as we, have discussed at length, I mean, we then had like Humane and all these other companions of AI that have been around, all of which have sort of have had a trouble finding their place. So I want to talk about, I guess, get your position on the idea of these AI companions. I feel like they didn't give it a chance to live. I also think it was only a year from what I heard. It was each contract was only a year with the celebrities, which just feels like not nearly enough time in the space that we're in to figure out if this thing can work. So AI celebrities, should they be doing it? The chatbot in general as an AI companion, what's your thoughts on that? And then I want to talk about what the Copyright Office just released.
Okay, that's like another three-parter. So let me quickly respond to these. One, I think the celebrity AIs were maybe just a little bit early. I've actually seen a lot of strong celebrity trained AIs. Like I think I've mentioned this before, but I actually really like Prof Cheese. I think it's solid. I think it's a little homegrown solution. But when I was playing around with the meta ones, like it just didn't feel authentic at all. And it was probably because they have so many clear parameters of what they can and can't say. It's almost like, when we work with brands and have like a comment bank of approved comments, like those never do well. It's just like the most like canned decision tree responses versus when you can be funny in the moment and like lean into things and take a bit more risk, which I'm sure just wasn't approved by the agents. So it makes sense. On the flip side, we at Vayner have been playing around a lot with like building our own AI for creators, even for some of our executives. Our head of media buying, John, recently built one where, people on the team can ask, we call them JMO, ask JMO questions about media buying and things like that. And of course, it's not 100%, but I think that's really interesting. I think the specialized knowledge AI companions are really useful, like incredibly useful for things like Harvey Legal and, the Prof Gs and the JMOs of the world. Like those are really interesting and helpful because they also answer so many of the same questions, like time after time. And ideally, the more questions they get, the better the responses can be, the more personalized they can be, et cetera. So I'm broadly a big fan of this. I think for celebrities, like there's probably too many parameters. And then I also think there's more risk when it comes to celebrities. Okay, great. What about if the Kendall Jenner bot says something that could be cancelable? Then that's a big problem. So they're probably doing the right thing by being a little bit more cautious and also not giving away all of their IP right? Because they want to make sure they continue to get that bag year after year. So that's how I think about it.
Well, first off, I want the link to the JMO bot because I always have
Yeah.
media buying
I think
questions.
it's on Instagram, like publicly. So I'll have to
Oh,
send it
okay,
around.
amazing. I'm gonna get on that. What's also interesting and was going around one of the private chats I'm in was it was released today that the Copyright Office, we'll put the link in the chat as well or in the show notes, just released their recommendation on their AI, sort of the report on how they believe personas and AI should be protected. So just to quote this tweet, it was the person, it was a woman named Near. She recapped it to say, the Copyright Office recommended the individual's federal right be licensable, not assignable, subject to guardrails, with remedies including monetary damages and injunctive relief, not preemptive of state laws. And in addition, as I was reading down, that they're considering that should happen for up to 20 years post-death. So the idea
Okay.
that you could not create an AI of someone without their express license permission, both while they're alive, but even up to 20 years post-death, I think that is the first sort of like salvo shot around the idea that we have to protect identity. I think we all probably saw over the weekend when Elon Musk sort of tweeted a deepfake Kamala Harris
Yes.
commercial, which I think a lot of people were kind of not happy about because not only does he run one of the largest platforms, but the fact that they expressly do not allow this on X and Twitter, the idea of impersonating someone else, and yet he posts content that has it, just makes, I wonder if that's part of the Copyright Office's decision of just like, hey, everyone has to be protected from the biggest to the smallest, and we have to start setting guardrails, of which I'm very happy about personally. But I wonder if that's also part of the larger conversation, even in the Meta decision.
I am sure that it is. Also, Elon operates according to his own rules.
I don't want Linda's job, I'll tell you that.
Yes. I think the argument in defense of him would be that, like, potentially it was clear that it was a spoof. I think that's probably what he would say, but I don't think that it necessarily was clear to everyone. And as we've talked about on this podcast before, Sam, a little AI, sticker or watermark or something like that is the feeling that many people have in terms of how to make this content appropriate. And platforms also, as you noted, have the ability to recognize that.
Yep. All right, Avery, fascinating discussion. We could do an entire episode on these topics, but we have an amazing guest today. You and I spoke the other day to Rachel Conlan. Rachel is the CMO of Binance. She has a big history in the media business and in the brand world, and she is now leading the marketing initiatives for the largest crypto exchange in the world. So it was really exciting to talk to Rachel, and I thought it was just a fascinating conversation. We will bring that to you after the break.
Can't wait.
All right, welcome back, Gen C. We are here with Rachel Conlan. Rachel is the CMO of Binance. So we're both going to talk marketing. We're going to talk crypto. We're going to talk about her journey. Really excited to have this conversation. Rachel, just tell us a little bit about you and sort of how you came to be CMO at Binance.
Thanks so much, Sam, and great to be here with both of you. I suppose, like many, my path to becoming CMO at Binance definitely wasn't a linear one. I think the blockchain industry, when I first started my career back in 2003, didn't even exist, in any way of the shape that we know it now. But if I think about all of the different roles along my 20-year journey, I do feel like all of the skills I've captured and built up had definitely uniquely positioned me for this role. I've had the privilege of working in a lot of different industries in the broader media and entertainment space. I started before joining Binance, I was with an agency network called Havas, part of Vivendi, for nearly 12 years. And through that role, I worked on nearly every type of client you can imagine, from big global clients like LVMH and working on the IBM Watson rollout to smaller founders and more disruptive businesses. And I think this experience, really gave me a well-rounded perspective on the significant role of strategy, of data, of understanding content and social, and how that shapes global brands. I spent some time after Havas working with CAA Sports, with Creative Artist Agency. And for those that don't know, they're one of the largest sports and entertainment groups globally. Traditionally, they represented talent. Now they're a multi-hyphenate business that works across every area of entertainment. And there I was really looking at brand partnerships and how you build cultural marketing programs using entertainment and IP, and really learned the power of cultural marketing and how that can help you build a much deeper cultural connection. That was really where I started to immerse myself in the space of crypto, Web3, and blockchain. I had the opportunity to advise a lot of the fintech and crypto companies that were coming to us during that time of COVID, when really what I would describe it was a gold rush. And we saw a lot of brands trying to enter into cultural marketing and into brand partnerships to try and kind of spotlight awareness quickly. And it just opened my eyes up to this space that was, had so much potential, yet there wasn't enough deep storytelling and enough translators in the space. So from CAA, I jumped over to a brand called OKX, and it's one of our competitors, but there I led brand and marketing initiatives and negotiated many of the brand partnerships like Man City and McLaren that they're involved in. And then Binance came calling, and as one of the biggest brands, and one of the most powerful brands that's had the biggest impact over the last 7 years, it was impossible not to take that call and make the jump over. So now in my role as CMO at Binance, I lead the global and regional marketing functions as well as our product marketing. And really what our everyday goal and kind of what gets me up every morning is to understand, like, how can we help people understand this space and enter into this space and make it accessible and educate people on this space, helping people understand, like, the more sophisticated traders, how they can enter in more deeply to the space. So definitely no boring day, and I'm very lucky in the role I'm in, but no, it's definitely been an incredible kind of 20 months with Binance.
Wow, amazing. And great early use of multi-hyphenate, a term that I think is like the term of 2024. Everyone's a multi-hyphenate now, apparently, including CIA. So that's great.
No, I love that term. I'm going to say I learned it from Professor Anita Alberse at Harvard, and she introduced me to it about 5 years ago. And it is so true of how business has evolved so much of recent.
It's so true. I described Gary as that the other day, and then we both looked at each other and laughed. I was like, I don't know why I said that, because it's hard to pin him into one category.
I figure if I'm on a marketing podcast, it's the one time I could use vernacular that I can't use internally now at Binance.
We welcome it.
Absolutely. We love it. So Rachel, you've had this really interesting career in marketing, and you were speaking a bit about your agency side experience, your brand side experience, and your experience, I would say, like, developing sort of media partnerships. How are you thinking about marketing more broadly and how it's evolved in your decades of experience in the field? I assume when you started at Havas, it was quite different than it is today. What are your sort of like general thoughts on the evolution of marketing as a CMO?
It's so funny. I don't think we can describe marketing as an evolution anymore. Like, over the last 20 years since I started.
Because it's always evolving.
It's
Right.
just a complete transformation.
Yeah.
When I think about, like, day one for me in agency world and what was important to us in terms of channels, like, the proliferation is just extraordinary. And I think, now as marketeers, we probably have one of the toughest jobs ever in terms of standing out in what is this world that's moving so quickly, where it's so hard to capture attention, but so easy to make mistakes, because
Yes.
we're moving at such a speed. But it is extraordinary to see how it's evolved and the sophistication. And I would argue that over the last 20 years, I've seen marketing take a much more important role in the boardroom discussions. And now you see marketers in Fortune 500 roles, which I would argue 20, 30 years, you would never have seen someone start as a marketeer and end up a CEO of a bank, as we've seen in some cases. But we also need to think about it, more importantly, from the perspective of consumers and users. My husband's a lawyer, and he says this to me every day. He tries to turn off everything he can so he can't be targeted, because from his perspective, the majority's perspective, they're just bombarded with content and messages. And so you can understand why it's so much harder to stand out emotionally. I think it really points to the importance from a business, from a brand perspective, of value propositions and really understanding what are your benefits and why, what is the role that you play with your consumers. And this is not something I've crafted. This is something over 20 years. I'm really lucky and really privileged in my career. I've had the opportunity to learn from some brilliant minds, who are now perceived kind of as icons in the industry. So I think there's a couple of simple things that I really focus on and I really reinforce to my team. Number one, and I think we're in an industry that this is more critical than ever, is about building trust. Consumers and our users, they crave authenticity, and ensuring that we're transparent and we're genuine in messaging is really critical. And number two, and this is something, I did a master's in documentary making as a as a kind of fun side project when I started my advertising career. And in that, I really learned the power of storytelling. And I think that's something that's more important than ever. Don't get me wrong, I have an incredible team of growth marketers and performance marketers. And we all know the drug that has provided, brands in this industry and in this time. But,
We're going to
storytelling.
clip that. That is exactly right, Rachel. It is a drug that people get hooked on that we might call more performance sales than marketing, but we could have a whole nother podcast on that.
Yeah. And I think that's something that is just so critical, whether it's a one-line ad that you're showing, a short TikTok video, or more longer form. You have to know, like, what is the story that you're trying to tell? Because that's so critical to try and connect with them. And, in our industry where crypto is so confusing to so many and there's so many myths about the space, we really need to reinforce those narratives. I think thirdly, data, but ensuring that we're gleaning the right insights from that. And we're really ensuring how we use that to personalize our users' experience. And above all, and I think that's something, I learned this in Havas, and this is something that's talked about a lot in the industry, is about agility and adaptability. But you have to, in our industry especially, understand that what is effective last week will not work next week. Just with the proliferation, not of channels, but just of sheer products and projects and what's new and the trends. And, I'd argue that that's something that we really try to put into effect in our team. Most people are working very long days, but we get it done. And for Binance, and from our perspective, it's something that's been talked a lot about the last decade. But I would argue the reason we're in the privileged position we are as a brand now is community, and building that sense of community around your brand and being able to bring those sub communities to understand, like, how you learn from those communities to be better as a business and a brand, and foster that loyalty, which is something that constantly keeps me up at night. And it's why I try and spend so much time with our crypto community now.
For someone who comes from the media background, Rachel, it's really interesting to hear a lot. Those 3 points you just mentioned really all like ladder to more like creative brand building initiatives. So I think, maybe your superpower has been able to combine that deep knowledge of how media works. Because for our Gen Z listeners who are not deep in this space, Havas is primarily known as a media agency and significant media buying power. But what we just talked about was more about like breaking through creatively in new and novel ways, which I think is the thing that a lot of CMOs are grappling with, right? Because you can buy media, but creativity, it's more than just something that you can buy. You have to like really have it.
I think just from the creativity perspective, one thing that to give credit to Vas, and I think this is partly because of the French heritage, or if you look at the history of Vas, there's so much, and we were always drilled into us that everything had to have a creative strategy to it. And that was very much a top down. Look, it's not realistic to say that gets applied across every brand. But one thing that I loved about my role in Avast anyway, and internationally, they were more known for campaigns than maybe they were in the US. But what is the audience and what is going to be the most compelling message that you send to them? And I was lucky to work with brands like LVMH there, where storytelling is so key. They didn't have as big media budgets at the time as many others. So it definitely teaches you how to be creative with what you're doing, when you're limited in what budget you have.
I think what's interesting is, I'm sitting here with two CMOs, and yet CMO has had, I think, a little bit of a rough couple of years as a title, right? A lot of people became chief growth officers. I think performance marketing became such a default for folks. And like Brian Morrissey just wrote a recent newsletter about sort of all performance marketing's job is to get you just as close to the sale as possible. And by being as close to the sale as possible, it's truly a transactional game. Whereas I think marketing's creativity is an emotional connection, not a transactional connection. And I think that's the tension we keep getting ourselves into. And I think especially with the power of creator marketing, where it is frankly like I align and this brings me joy, so why wouldn't I sort of support the person or buy the thing that they're supposedly loving? I wonder if we're going to be entering a sort of more dynamic creative age of marketing coming soon, where we actually can say one is data analytics and one is very science driven and one is very emotional driven. Sometimes they meet in the middle and sometimes they actually diverge, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think, Sam, you've hit the nail on the head. And we talk about that a lot with the leaders on my team, is finding that compromise and that balance. Like knowing that, you do need the drug of performance marketing and the targeting that allows you, but that creatively, you need to have the right formats. And I think about it, what's shared with you on a daily basis? It's fun content that has little messages and stories. So I think it's like, how do we find that balance now and ensure that we're able to use the medium of storytelling in the right, use storytelling in the right mediums to meet your audiences where they want to be met. So it's definitely a conundrum, but I do hope what you're predicting about us going into this era of creative will come true, because, I think it's something that we've lost a little bit in the marketing field, and we need to bring back.
I'm calling it now, Sam. I think you are right. I mean, there's been a number of different things that have sort of chipped away performance marketing, performance sales, whatever you want to call it, whether that's like iOS 14. Now, Google, this is like hot off the presses after literally like a decade of saying they're going away from cookies. They're like, never mind. Sorry, guys. Plenty of memes abound on that topic. But I think, when I think of brands who are really breaking through in new and novel ways, oftentimes like CPG companies I use as a reference just because it's all marketing, right? You just mentioned you have the product marketing function. That's a big deal at tech companies. If you're a water brand, if you're Liquid Death, like it's marketing. Like marketing drives sales and product development. So Sam, I'm going to say that I think that is coming soon, and it is already here, right? Like when creativity drives business results, like amazing things happen. And we see this proven time and time again. And Rachel, I know you guys are doing a bunch of cool stuff in that, which we want to get back to. So question for you, as the largest crypto exchange in the world, how do you position yourself to continue to attract new customers? And what do you think is their motivation to come into crypto? I'm sure you've done extensive like user research. Why? You're the biggest player out there. Why are people still coming to Binance? What's motivating them?
I want to caveat one thing. While we're the largest exchange in the world, and we hit this amazing milestone recently of 210 million users, which is about just under half of those kind of totally using crypto, there's still a whopping like 95% of the global population that has not even engaged or touched crypto.
Oh, we're very aware of that. We're so early.
Unfortunately, we're aware.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. While we've got the spotlight on us, there's so much that we can do. Look, our core base is, so important to us, and they've been the early adopters, and they've driven, us and this industry to where it is. But obviously, in order for us to continue to drive the acquisition and the education of new customers is going to be critical. And that's going to be critical in order to us, like, to really be able to scale the ecosystem. I think the potential user base, and I use a lot of my friends and family as the anecdotes here, like they just don't understand crypto. And I would argue that it's not even about not understanding crypto. They have so many misconceptions, and there's so many myths that they believe about crypto. And arguably that has been created by a lot of the media attention that the industry has gotten. But what's really exciting at the moment is that there's a positive media spotlight on crypto. I think since the Bitcoin ETFs, and now this week with the ETFs being approved, there's finally a spotlight where people are starting to see this industry kind of integrate into industries that they're a little bit more familiar with. And I would argue that gives more credibility and this opportunity for people to start considering to take the first step in. Back to your question on like, how do we get more people, how do we look at getting more people involved? I think from our perspective, knowledge is power. And we've always, over the last 5 years, we've focused aggressively on how we can educate more users, invite more users in through education. We've built an online platform that's not dissimilar to a masterclass or an Udemy, which essentially it's called Binance Academy. We have everything on there, from beginner's guides to more sophisticated information around trading strategies. So it's really a one-stop shop for people when they want to start their journey. And at the moment, even when I wanted to enter into this space in a more meaningful way and immerse myself, there is so much information out there, it can become confusing. So we've really tried to distill that down. And obviously, it's not just our platform. We work with a lot of creators and what we describe as our crypto KOLs, or otherwise known as influencers, to ensure that we're really pushing the right content out there and creating content that's needed. Second part, which I would argue that the crypto industry has a lot to learn from some of the traditional tech brands, is we really need to make our industry more accessible. From a UX and UI perspective, I think our industry has a lot to learn. Binance at this moment is really, really obsessed about how do we optimize your journey to make it as frictionless as possible. And it has been, like, I'll use my father as an example. He wanted to open up a crypto account. He called me 4 times, before he could open that account up in Ireland, just because he didn't find it intuitive. This is the guy that, is obsessed with his iPhone. So I think that's something that we're very much focused on. And just going back to that sense of community, we're constantly looking at our community, how we grow it and how we interact with them through social media, through online and offline events, through interactive content. And I think that's been something that's been really unique about this community from day one in terms of how it's grown, is that sense of belonging that people have to Binance and to the broader industry, because it was built around this really strong mission of financial freedom and wanting to affect change. And I would argue that still those gatekeepers and those early adopters are still like our most powerful vehicles for growth, because of how they bring in new customers and how they talk about us, in everything from a larger AMA to dinner tables, which essentially the passion and motivation those individuals have is really what's bringing more users in. I think, just to go back, because I'm conscious about the second part of your question as to why people are motivated to enter into this space. I would argue that, when I ask people, I was in Turkey last weekend, with 800 users of Binance, and these are some of the earliest adopters over the last 10 years of crypto. And when you speak to that community, they want to enter into this because it offers them, it's aspirational. It offers them new opportunities that they were not afforded in their day-to-day. And I would argue that whether you're a new investor in the space or whether you're someone more seasoned, it really is that opportunity to take advantage of a new kind of financial trend that opens up a new ecosystem for them and opens up new opportunity for them. And I think that's something that's really powerful when you look at the future growth of this industry for us to really capitalize on. And even when speaking, we're working a lot with the different platforms to try and gather as much insights as we can about crypto users. And we were speaking to the TikTok team a month ago, and they did some research on us. And the main search term that's associated with crypto on their platform is financial opportunity. So really, that's the key motivator in terms of why people are entering in.
That does worry me. I've seen some of those TikToks though, and I think some of them might be quite optimistic.
But I, look, don't get me wrong. There is this to the moon and the vernacular that's associated by this industry. But I do think that's going to, as we're maturing, like if you look even at the beginning of social media and the nascent trends of that, as we're maturing, it will become not more professional, because I don't want to use that term, because you don't want to take away from the everyday experiences. But there's also a lot of content now showing, how people are using it day to day, and how people instant markets where it's available.
I think that's a really interesting point, Rachel, because Sam knows that I believe this, but I believe social is a mirror, right? Like there's amazing things and then there's not amazing things, and social is just reflecting that. TikTok doesn't create that. It's just a forum for anyone to share that perspective. And what's popular is not what TikTok thinks is popular. It's what people want to watch. And people want financial opportunity. And particularly in the case of Gen Z, they are consuming so much financial content and financial information. They have a very different, even for things like Roth IRA, like that is a term that is commonly searched by people who are within Gen Z or who haven't even started working yet, which is a whole like completely new behavior versus, a millennial who wasn't thinking that way. And I think crypto has been wrapped up in that for good, and then also sometimes with unrealistic expectations. But whether or not you and Binance are driving that, like that information exists. So it almost to me becomes like an obligation to participate in that with factual information.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And that's something that we take very seriously, not just within the marketing team at Binance, but more broadly, is to ensure that it's objective, neutral information that's getting out there. Just given there are so many narratives, like it's important that you get straight to the point, of what is the reality of this. We really push a principle of doing your own research, in a lot of the information that we're sharing, because ultimately, if you don't do your own research in this space and you don't educate yourself, that's where the dangers lie. But I would argue that that's the same in the traditional finance industry and other industries as well.
Absolutely.
But I think in this industry, it's more critical than ever.
But I mean, I really think it's everywhere though, right? Like you could be talking to an investment professional who might work at a bank, right? And they have the same disclosures. It's not as memeified as DYOR, but they have that too. Like you have to sign that information when you're taking any type of investment advice.
Yeah, and also though we need to recognize working, Binance is so global. We operate in over 100 countries. I spent 14 years in the States. I was always blown away coming from Ireland over to the US, hearing that at 21 friends had stock portfolios. I didn't even know what a stock portfolio was at 21, arriving into New York. I do think we need to recognize that the financial literacy and the level of information is so different from one market to another. So that's another big obligation that I think not just in Binance, but the broader crypto and fintech industry has to take into account that, as we're giving these tools to users in different markets, we need to ensure that we're supporting their literacy levels as well. And we're doing that in a way, we know this, like I don't have time to sit down and watch endless seminars on what to do. We need to make sure we're sharing the information and the tools in a way that's digestible and fun for them, which is a big part of what we're trying to do, but always making sure that it's practical.
Rachel, I want to challenge a little bit here, because I think I will say I was on Binance probably 2017, and back then, whether it was Binance, whether it was Coinbase, didn't matter. All of it was still pretty difficult, and which was to say it was much easier than it was in 2014 to get Bitcoin, but it
Yeah.
still took a level of knowledge and sort of expertise to know what you're doing, because there is so much out there that is harmful to the average user. You brought the story up of your father who's still having trouble, and yet he probably doesn't have trouble with Duolingo or the New York Times app, or some of the things that really simplicity has been built into the app side in a way that is very intuitive. And I think that's where crypto still has a tech problem, because we still think it's finance and we don't think it's consumer tech. I think that one of the challenges that I have though is, and I'm not saying you guys play this game, I think it's actually the crypto narrative which is the problem, which is you have on the one hand people who are very focused on sort of like almost playing an options type game, right? Like now it's like you have to know what perps are and all these other things for like kind of a professional trader, but these are casual people trying to get into something very complex. On the second side, you have people who are talking about meme coins that go up and down within 10 hours. And so you have to be in and out in order to be able to participate in that sort of online game that's happening. All of that stuff, I think, makes it very hard for you to go from 210 to 270 million. Because what you're really doing at that point is you're talking to anywhere from 5,000 to 500,000 very active in crypto people, right? And that's my worry with this whole thing, which is when I use my JP Morgan account, I know I'm just going to like send Zelle, pay a bill, check my balance. Maybe I'll buy an index stock if I have a little extra money in my 401k or whatever it may be. But those are relatively simplistic actions. Crypto still has a level of complexity that we've all been talking about for now over a decade, that we have to make this stuff both simple, usable, but equitable across the world. And we actually continually keep a narrative that makes it complex, inside jokes. You have to know how to swap from this to that in order to get that. Like there's a lot of real stuff there that I think plays such an insider game that it really deters the average person, because they might get in once, but once they get burned, they're not going to come back. And I think that's our big worry. And I'm sure as an exchange, especially one of the largest, you have to play the long game of maximum number of users for ease of use, not the game of, am I getting the Kamala token today or am I getting the Trump token tomorrow?
But it's interesting you make the analogy of a bank, because that's one of the ways in which I think this industry is going to evolve. We obviously have our pro and our light versions of our app. And the goal of that is to ensure that we're meeting people where they're ready to be involved. I do think we've got this moment in media where meme coins have a lot of discussion globally, but I don't think meme coins are how my father is going to enter into crypto. I think he'll enter into
Never
it,
know.
as a mean of hodling on Bitcoin to understand it as a digital asset. So I think that's where it's not a one size fits all strategy. I think that's where we need to be very mindful in terms of how we're communicating to different groups and different audiences, from that newbie who wants to come in here for a saving, the role of saving, rather than coming in here to trade options and future copy trading and to understand like what meme coins. I think it's for different users, the same way traditional banks are set up, from the retail user to the wealth advisory to the more sophisticated traders. So I think that's where, that's why the education and ensuring that we have education available for all those different types of users and we're helping them access it in as easy a form as possible is important. From the media perspective, I think that we need to do a better job about helping people understand how they can enter into it. That is about investing responsibly, and I think that's something that's going to be a big part of ensuring that we get to the 500 million users from the 200 million users. So, it's definitely something that keeps me up at night. On the point about UX and UI and simplicity, I think the industry is built by technologists. So they were willing to put the work in, Sam, as you were, to be one of the early adopters. But the next cohort of users won't. So that's just a necessity. And if we don't do that, TradFi will embrace it. So that's why that integration with more traditional financial systems is going to be critical, and why Binance at the moment is really pushing for that, ensuring we're most compliant so we can do that, to ensure that we're providing it in an accessible format for users.
So the get rich quick scheme is not your marketing strategy, which sounds like a good idea.
No, definitely not. Like high level,
Yeah,
invest responsibly.
absolutely. And do your own research.
Right. There's no Binance Telegram bot right now.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
With that said, though, I think you bring up a great point, Rachel, that people want to engage in different ways, right? Like some people, there is this like gamified, memeified element, and that drives conversation. It's almost like an activity, like a hobby for a lot of people too. Then there are people who are really looking at this as like an investment, and then some who it's a mix, and some who are interested in specific components, and some who want to go all in, staking and yield farming and all these things, just like there are in more traditional financial institutions. So I'll back you up on that, because it's not like a bank is a one size fits all thing either. There's checking accounts, there's private banking, there's people who are making daily trades, and you have to be available to the spectrum of users, especially across the globe, who have very different expectations, needs, and financial literacy, to your earlier point. But I also want to ask you about brands, because you mentioned some of the partnerships that you brokered in previous roles within Binance. I know you all have done some partnerships with Cristiano Ronaldo and F1, alongside other sort of big brand initiatives. And we've seen some of those types of partnerships go really well, and some, especially celebrity token era, not so well. I'd love to get your perspective on what is like the secret sauce for success in an authentic brand partnership, and how you all are thinking about that at Binance.
I'm a big, big believer in the power of brand partnerships. I think whether it's crypto or another emerging industry, it's an amazing way to be able to tell a story and invite new audiences in. And I think in my experience, not just at Creative Artists Agency, but at Havas, I was lucky to see many work well. But as you say, some, if not set up and structured in the right way and for the right motivations, I've seen them crash and burn as well. And look, not all brand partnerships hit the mark, and then others truly stand out. So sometimes that is the luck of the draw, which is unfortunate, but some of it is really down to a strong kind of insight and a strong, strategic imperative to build something that's right. I think you mentioned already Cristiano Ronaldo with us, the fan engagement that we have had, both from our existing audience, from those new users, and from his audience, has been really phenomenal. And I worked with Ronaldo and his team previously at CAA, and I actually inherited the brand partnership. It was done before I joined, and I was really surprised when I joined Binance, when he had decided to work in crypto, because we'd always be told that he wouldn't have. But what he saw was the opportunity. One thing about how he builds his business and how he thinks about his fans is constantly helping them engage in new innovations and new technologies. And for him, when he learned more about this space and about the role of NFTs, he saw this opportunity to interact and almost use it as a loyalty program with his fans. When I've been speaking to his team since, that he loved that opportunity to be able to give access to his fans for different experiences that traditional platforms didn't give him the opportunity to do. And we've seen that ongoing. We're on drop 4. We've 2 more drops with him, and we've been able to provide amazing experiences and once in a lifetime experiences for his fans, but also have Ronaldo be perceived in a different light. And I think the really important and the most important aspects of a successful brand partnership is, first of all, starting and ensuring that there's a clear alignment of values between the two parties. And it's really also understanding that it should not be a quick branding initiative or putting your logo, if it's a sports property, putting your logo up and expecting that a flood of new users is going to join you. I think it really goes back to, what we were speaking about earlier, which is like, what's that compelling story? What are the shared attributes? And how are you building something, if it's a year-long partnership or a 4-year-long partnership, how are you building that story together to ensure that you've got engaging content, engaging tentpole moments as part of the brand partnership or the social activities that helps you keep the community that you're targeting, whether in our case, it be fans of Ronaldo that we think may be interested in entering into sports, or whether it be with a music partnership, we're trying to connect with them, in a different passion. And I would think when you do it right, I think it can just reap so many benefits from a brand's perspective, but it really has to be about 360 and using all levers and channels to make sure that you're connecting with the potential users in the right way. With Ronaldo, interestingly, with the cohort of users that we were speaking to with him over the course of 2 years, we saw those who engaged in the NFT product. We saw then a 76% increase in first trades among some of those new users that came in through Ronaldo. And that was a really interesting, that wasn't just done through us presenting one piece of content and one message to those users. It was through really bringing them on the journey and helping them understand how to enter into the space. So I think whether you're teaming up with sports entertainment or whether you're teaming up with Web2 partners, I think there has to be that shared attribute and shared belief in the industry and commitment to doing innovative things. If you don't do that over the course of the last 5 years, I think that's where you see them fail, which is interesting. I would argue as well, just from my period at CAA, there was, going back to that get rich quick, it was the gold rush. And I think a lot of those brand partnerships failed because celebrities thought they could enter into the space quickly and that they could monetize them quickly and not have to invest time in the ongoing development of that partnership. And that's where a lot of them really failed, honestly.
It's still happening. One of my favorite basketball players this week fell prey to this. So it is still ongoing, but it's really amazing to see, some of the more strategic partnerships that have been able to drive success and education and win-win-win on all sides.
Yeah.
Sam, I know we're running out of time. Ask our best question yet.
So Rachel, first of all, thank you for spending so much time with us. Thank you for giving us your insights. It's been a really wide-ranging conversation. I would just love to hear your predictions on both Binance and crypto 5 years ahead. If you had thought 5 years prior, you probably would not have predicted the ETFs. You probably would not have predicted 400 and plus million users. Where do you think that we're going to be in the future? And with what you're building at Binance, where do you think Binance will be in that journey?
The crypto, to the point how we started about marketing constantly evolving, I think we're seeing crypto evolving at even a faster pace than what we've seen in the marketing and media world. But if you look at Binance's growth, I think it's reminiscent of what we saw with the big tech giants and how those platforms evolved. They started with niche products, with niche communities, and then they grew into global powerhouses that touch all of our lives on a daily basis. And I'm bullish on this, and I hope that we're on this similar trajectory, because I think that the opportunity in this industry and the opportunity in the digital finance world and the opportunity for it to bring value to the everyday user is phenomenal. It took us as a brand 5 years to get to 100 million users, and then another 2 years on top of that to get to 200. So I think we're very poised at this moment to see similar growth to what we saw with those tech platforms. Overall, I think the next 5 years for the industry is going to bring significant growth and transformation. I think we've got regulatory clarity coming in around the world in many markets. I think the MiCA regulation that's coming into Europe is going to set a region up that is more conservative around finances, set it up for more growth. I think the institutional interest, as you pointed out, with the Bitcoin and ETF approvals is going to bring a lot more institutional. And with that, I think we'll see a lot more retail investors coming in, and we're constantly seeing new innovations. And to what I was sharing earlier about the real life use cases, so the integration with traditional finance systems is going to be critical to be able to put crypto in the hands of users. Sam, you mentioned earlier, you really invested time to be able to enter into that space. Not everyone is willing to invest that time. So we need to make it easier to convert between fiat and crypto to see more wide scale and better adoption. I think from a marketing perspective, from Binance's perspective, I think we as players and some of the OG players really have to invest a lot of time in telling our story more loudly at both the global and local level, and really talking about the user benefits and telling the user stories around this. And I also foresee more Web2 brands. I think we had a period in the last cycle and the last bull cycle where a lot of Web2 brands got involved and got involved quickly, maybe without doing the right due diligence or structuring the programs in the right way. But I can see just from the incoming that we're getting that a lot more global businesses and brands really, really want to engage and understand how they can use this technology and use these innovations as a new way to interact with their users. So I'm excited about that. From a Binance perspective, we're just going to continue to focus on how we can build, enhance our products, our user experience, and ensure that we have the best innovations and pioneering innovations, and ultimately that live up to what was the original mission of why this industry and why Binance started, which was about how you unlock financial freedom. And how you take advantage of these technologies to improve your financial situation. So, I'm definitely excited. I'm bullish on this industry. I wouldn't be working 24/7 if I wasn't. But I think at the moment, we're at this kind of critical juncture where the industry and media interest, we have to capitalize on that and continue to drive momentum.
Couldn't think of a better person to do it. Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights, your experience, and your vision for the future of crypto and Binance with us. It was such a lovely conversation.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a good day.
Thanks, Rachel. Avery, I really enjoyed having Rachel on. I think in many ways, Rachel sort of embodies this show because we talk a lot about emerging technology. They're building an emerging technology brand, especially in crypto. And yet a lot of traditional marketing thinking, a lot of talk about performance and acquisition and how you bring more users and media, exactly, how you bring more users in. So I really thought that was a pretty wide-ranging, lovely conversation. What were your thoughts?
1,000,000%. Binance is a huge company that has, tremendous impact in the crypto space. So it's great to get sort of their perspective on marketing. She talks a lot about growth marketing and about sort of that performance aspect, which I see a lot of those messages from them. And it's also cool to understand a little bit more, on the Ronaldo thing and their macro plans. I know they have something coming up in October, so maybe we'll do a Gen Z live from there.
Possible. I also think, we didn't really touch on it, but when FTXs of the world were spending tremendous amounts of money on talent and on these big Super Bowl commercials, but still, I think Binance was always a little more reserved in how they did it. I think they were, and whether that was CZ or someone else, I think they were saying we don't need to be so splashy that we are going to show up in those spaces. And I think it probably paid off for them in a way that, we didn't really get into it, but I think it'd be an interesting deep dive to figure out.
We will need a part 2 at some point. But Sam, this was a fantastic episode. Gen Z, let us know, as always, what you thought of this episode, what you want to hear more of, any notes. We love hearing from you all. And I hope you all have a wonderful week, Gen Z community.
Thanks, Gen Z.